Video number 4 is going to entail replacing the gear on the end of the camshaft. It's a pretty simple deal to replace. We have a lock washer with a bent tab. Basically, we got to bend that tab down, remove that bolt, and then put the gear puller on there and pull it off. And then after that, I'll show a video of installing it. And then you're probably going to have to put a screwdriver back into the flywheel or something to hold it still to get that nut loose. Or bolt, I should say. And the bolt really shouldn't be that tight on there. I just snuck down pretty good. It's a 13 millimeter bolt head, and underneath it you have this little washer with the tab that you bend up, and it's got a little keyway on it that should line up with the keyway on the shaft. Get yourself a new one of these when you put it back on. This washer and the conical washer that goes on there, I think it was about $1.70 total for the both of those. So order yourself some new ones when you get the gear. So now all we got to do is I got to put the gear puller on there. We got to figure out a way, because the end of the camshaft or the end of the crankshaft has a big hole in it. We got to figure out a way to get the gear puller to sit up against something to push against it. Okay, so I have the puller hooked up on the gear. As you can see, I used a short half-inch drive extension to go down inside the crankshaft, and I got the puller hooked up. One thing you want to be careful of, and I just noticed this as I was doing that if that rotates, you got to be careful that your puller doesn't come up and damage that oil port, because that's how that gear and that and stuff gets oiled back there. So now I'm just going to use the ratchet, and I'm going to pull that gear off. I stuck a screwdriver back in the flywheel to keep it from turning, and so I'm holding the screwdriver with my right hand and then just pulling the gear off with the gear puller on my left. And just nice and steady, and it'll come off. And it's free. And there's a little key there. You want to make sure that stays in the crankshaft, because when you put the next gear on, that needs to line up. There's the half-inch drive extension I used that I just put down inside the gear. One thing I mentioned to you on my last video was I'm going to show you this gear puller and the kind of feet that you need on it. If you can see how thin those feet are, that's the kind you need to pull these gears off, because it sits nice down behind the gear. And again, just go to AutoZone, rent it for $20. When you're done with it, you take it back, they give you your $20 back. I have the new Herzog gear started on there. I use the old conical washer and the bolt. And what I'm going to do is slowly draw it into the crank just by turning that bolt. Again, I'm going to do it very slowly because you don't want to get that cocked on the crank. You don't want to mess up the threads inside the crank. And so just do it very slowly and make sure it slowly goes on. You feel any binding, stop and maybe pull the gear off and see if it's cocked a little bit and get it lined back up again. But once I have it fully on there, then I'll pull the bolt out, I'll put the new conical washer and the new lock washer on and finish up the job. Again, when you do this and you tighten that bolt, you're going to need to stick a screwdriver in the flywheel on the other side and hold it as you tighten that down. See, not feeling any binding. It's a little snug, but I can sit there and watch that gear go on. And I'm not in any danger of messing up the threads or the end of the crank or anything like that. The one thing I did as I was installing this gear and drawing it down, it was starting to get a little snug, and I wasn't sure if it was in all the way. So I just temporarily installed the camshaft with the new gear on it. And that way, as I drew it in and it started snugging up pretty good, I could see that it lined up good with it, and I drew it in as far as it needed to go. So what I'm going to do next is I got the new lock washer, and I have the new conical washer. So there's a hole in the conical washer, and on the back side there's a little groove cut in. That groove sits down inside the keyway on the and then on the lock washer there's a little tab that sits inside the hole on the conical washer, and then you bend it directly opposite that little tab that sits inside the conical washer. So I'll go ahead and put those on now. So I have the bolt with the new conical washer and the lock washer installed. As you can see, there's the conical washer on the outside, the little slot where the keyway goes, or the chuck for the crankshaft sits up there. There's the little hole that the tab off the lock washer goes in, and then I just used a screwdriver and tapped it with a hammer to flatten it out on the flat side of the bolt on the other side. And when you put this bolt in, I mean snug. You don't need to tighten it down. Just snug it up good, and then put that lock washer on, and that gear is not going anywhere.